1. This is a tale of how I maliciously complied my client into a much better visa route after the Home Office refused her first application. I'm an immigration lawyer in the UK, and if you don't know anything about our immigration system, it's just a mess. The rules are tough, often cruel, very complex, and there's very little flexibility. It doesn't matter how sympathetic someone's circumstances are, if you don't meet all the rules, you're not coming in, even if it's to join your family. Even if you're an elderly person who just wants to spend their final years with their British children. Especially if you're an elderly person who just wants to spend their final years with their British children. Enter Doris. Doris is a 93-year-old Australian citizen who lives alone in a nursing home. All her children are in the UK. Doris had a modest wish to move in with her daughters in the UK and spend her twilight years with her family. She was in pretty good health, but her continuing isolation led to anxiety and depression, especially after she was the victim of a robbery. So Doris did what she thought was the right way of going about it. She applied to move to the UK as an adult-dependent relative. What she did not know was that this route had almost impossible requirements, so tough that only about 5% of these applications are actually granted outright, and a further 5% succeed on appeal. So the odds are pretty terrible, and you don't get the £3,250 application fee that you paid back if it's refused. Along financial and relationship requirements, she had to show that she required continuous care with everyday tasks like dressing and cooking for herself, and that this care is not available in Australia. She could meet neither of these rules, and her application was refused. The refusal letter made a point of emphasizing her excellent health, important for later as evidenced by the letter she included from her doctor, completely ignoring the parts about her anxiety and depression. This is when she approached my firm for help. Now, appealing this decision would have been a waste of time. She clearly didn't need constant care with everyday tasks, and any care that she might have needed could be found in Australia. But after speaking with Doris, we realized something. Not only was she a Commonwealth citizen as a citizen of Australia, but both her grandparents were born in the UK. So we hatched a plan. The plan. What Doris didn't know is there was another visa that she might be eligible for. UK ancestry. To meet the requirement, she had to be a Commonwealth citizen and have at least one grandparent born in the UK. Done and done. However, this was technically a work visa, and she had to intend to work in the UK, and she was very much retired. The one thing about the ancestry route is that the Commonwealth citizenship, UK-born grandparent requirements mean that, overwhelmingly, the people who qualify for this route are white. And because our immigration system is somewhat racist, that means that many aspects of this visa are generous or even lax compared to other routes. You get a 5-year visa straight away instead of having a 2.5-year one that has to be renewed at extortionate prices before you can qualify for permanent residence. Even the application fee is lower than other categories. Crucially, when it comes to the work aspect, you don't need to be sponsored by an employer. You don't need to work a certain number of hours. The work can be on and off, and even volunteering counts as work. The malicious compliance. You say Doris is in such great health that she doesn't qualify for an adult-dependent relative visa? Okay, cool. She'll apply for a work visa then. Since the work could be volunteering, she reached out to a community centre in the UK and offered to help volunteer at a lunch service they provided for the elderly. The centre was thrilled to have a new volunteer and wrote her a letter confirming this. After preparing all of the other documents, including going as far back as the 19th century, like her grandparents' birth certificates, we were almost ready to go. All that remained was our covering letter. After outlining how she met all of the requirements, I couldn't resist quoting from her previous refusal letter about her excellent health and explaining that given that Doris would now be working in the UK, I also provided details of the few hours a week she would be volunteering at the community centre, and reminded them that their own guidance says that they cannot discriminate by age. Her visa was granted, and she has now joined her family in the UK, as she wanted all along. And all she has to do to apply for permanent residence in 5 years' time is volunteer for a few hours a week. It's worth pointing out that the reason the adult-dependent relative rules are so stringent is because in 2012 the Home Office decided that it's costing the country too much to allow elderly parents to settle here, as they were considered a drain on the NHS, our universal healthcare system that is free at the point of use. So the rules were changed to make it almost impossible for them to move to the UK. This is despite the fact that prior to the rule change, only about 2,000 people used this route to move to the UK. But there was nothing they could do to stop this 93-year-old in excellent health from joining her family here on this work visa. 2. I, 30 and male, work as a cleaner in a school for special needs children. I'm good at what I do, and I take pride in coming in every day to make sure that both the children and the teachers that work there have a clean and safe environment to work in. Some backstory. Before I started working at this location in April of 2022, they've had a lot of bad luck with hiring cleaners, as the branch we're in technically falls under specialized cleaning and not general cleaning. In the first 4 months of 2022, they've had 15 cleaners that all disappointed, stopped showing up, or were fired for another reason. This has caused the general custodian of this special needs school, my direct supervisor, to be skeptical of any new cleaner that comes in, which is very fair. Now, I like to give 110% at work. Whether that's smart or not, I'm not sure, but I like to leave my work knowing that I gave it my all. That is why, when I saw the daily and weekly task list and had done an online course on how to effectively clean, I knew that, in practice, that would leave a very messy workplace, since not everything could be cleaned correctly. Imagine a desk of a child that has a single eraser on it. According to my outline course from the company, that disqualifies that entire desk from cleaning. I won't be allowed to clean it. Furthermore, if chairs are not at the desk, I am not allowed to sweep or mop under it, because it's not the cleaner's job. As such, I've been making some really positive changes to my work schedule, daily, weekly task list, and the way I do things to not only meet the minimal requirements that my company asks for, but also to go above and beyond. Be flexible with the teachers, engage with the students, and leave a beautiful workspace. This went great for a while. Now, the custodian has for some reason been getting way more critical of my work. The smallest speck of dust missed or a small drop of coffee spilled somewhere that happened after I was done with work, and he's blowing up my phone with text messages that I need to do things differently, in a wasteful way, or telling me first thing when I come in that I need to take my work more seriously. This morning he told me, try and stick to the planning and the correct methods. So I told him that I would. Now, I started to follow the paper list with the daily tasks and my methods completely to a T. Every half-assed method that I knew would leave the classrooms and bathrooms in a horrible state. Trash cans need emptying? Nope, not on my list. One piece of paper on a filthy desk? No longer my problem. Spills in the hallways? Looks like mopping the floor isn't on today's task list. Sorry. The entire place looked horrible. I had to hold myself back to not do more than the list because I hate leaving work unfinished. But I was finally done. I approached the teachers of the classrooms that I had to clean today beforehand, explained the situation and promised them to give their classrooms a proper cleaning the next day, because they and the students shouldn't be the victim of my malicious compliance, but they were in on it. They even agreed to give their signature on my task list to sign off that they think I did all of the work correctly. Naturally, the custodian didn't like my work today, and we had a good heart-to-heart moment. I told him that I really appreciate that he wants to safeguard the quality of my work. It's what they pay me for after all. But I hope that I have shown him and some teachers that I go above and beyond daily, and that today's work, that looked like a mess, was my company's standard. I also let him know that the constant badgering was incredibly unmotivating. It was really putting a damper on my spirits. I told him that I'd be doing my work normally again tomorrow, and he said he appreciated all the work I usually do, and that he tried to be more flexible as well as put more trust in me. All's well that ends well, I suppose. I just want to make sure that these special needs children have a clean school to learn, laugh, and play in after all. 3. I used to work as a temp in a cardboard factory. I started out assisting the machine operators in their work, but after the person who managed the materials, cutting forms, printing stamps and ink, who henceforth shall be referred to as Dave, was forced to take a week off, paid vacation he was forced to take before the end of the year, and the end-of-year rush was coming up, and things went south because the floor managers couldn't keep up with his job and their own at the same time. The company decided we needed a second person to do Dave's job, to avoid situations like that in the future. They tested several people by having them work together with Dave for a couple of hours, and apparently I was the only one who did a decent job, and so I was told Dave would be training me. I was never asked if I was interested. I didn't even know they were looking for someone to help Dave until I arrived at work one day, and my schedule said I would be working with Dave. Of course, I didn't mind because since I was already capable of helping operate 8 out of the 10 machines in the factory, I figured this was a great way to further solidify an actual contract with the company. Now, during his week off, David met a woman, and they started dating. She would constantly text him while he was at work, and it showed in his productivity. Of course, the COO figured his drop in productivity was because I was slowing him down. As time went on, Dave's girlfriend moved in with him. Now, I haven't mentioned this yet, but the factory had a 2-shift system. Early shift and late shift. Most of us worked in rotating shifts. But Dave had a fixed early shift because he had to be there on Monday mornings. Now, this meant Dave and his girlfriend could never go out on weekdays, and even had to go to bed quite early. So Dave requested to be put back on rotating shifts once he had finished training me. The COO said he would look into it, but kept giving Dave excuses, so he started interviewing for another job. Then came the day me and Dave were called into the COO's office and got yelled at for not pulling our weight and stuff like that. One of the things mentioned were repeated tardiness. Dave couldn't deny that one. He had overslept several times in the last few months. But I had only been tardy once, because of a flat tire. So wanting to set the record straight, I tried to interject about my flat tire, and the COO snapped at me to keep my trap shut while he's talking. So after his rant and he dismisses us from his office, I once again bring up the flat tire and he just snaps at me again that I should have just avoided having a flat tire. That was the last drop for Dave. He got home, wrote his letter of resignation, mailed it to the COO, and accepted one of the job offers he had gotten that week. For the next 3 months, I'm stuck doing all the work on my own. Also, during that time, due to a change in the laws of my country, I might become homeless unless I get a contract. So I start asking the COO for a contract, since I've been there 2.5 years as a temp at that point. Just like with Dave, he keeps giving me excuses. After an incident with them refusing my vacation time request I put in that included a Monday, they finally gave me someone to train to be my second. Abdul. About a month after I started training Abdul, I get called into the floor manager's office. Apparently a mistake was made somewhere and he asks me how it happened. Now that was the first week I was letting Abdul work independently without me constantly telling him what to do. So I tell the floor manager that Abdul had done his job and I had not yet had the chance to inspect his work. They grumble but just dismiss me. A week later I get called in again for a similar situation. So again I point out that Abdul is learning and mistakes will be made. So this time the floor manager blows up at me that I have to stop blaming everything on Abdul, and if I blame one more mistake on Abdul being a rookie, he's getting me fired. This is where the malicious compliance comes in. Around this time, me and Abdul were put on opposing shifts. My first order of business every day would be to double-check all of Abdul's work and fix any mistakes. I couldn't inform him of his mistakes, so he kept making them. He also started to get sneaky. You see, part of our tasks had to be done in an area of the factory where only the two of us would frequently go. So Abdul would do all of the work that was to be done where people could see him work, leaving me with all the tasks behind the scenes, meaning I was never anywhere to be found. We also had these big barrels of ink which were hooked up to a machine that mixed the basic colors of ink into other colors. Abdul had always refused to change these barrels when they were empty. He would usually state that he hadn't had time, even though making sure those barrels aren't empty was a priority job. This eventually all culminates into a moment, about 8 months after Dave left, where I am once again called into the COO's office. I'm thinking I'm finally getting my contract after 3 years as a temp. I'm also convinced Abdul got a contract the week before, though he and the COO always denied that. Instead, I'm told I'm fired. The COO also goes out of his way to inform me that he's been wanting to fire me for 6 months now, because he blames me for Dave quitting, but was asked not to by the floor manager until I had trained someone to replace me, and they considered Abdul ready to do the job now. He also told me that he did appreciate the work I did, he just had a problem with me personally. After my meeting with the COO, I made my round of the factory to inform my coworkers that I have been fired and to say goodbye. The look on Abdul's face was pure panic. He suddenly realized that despite me demonstrating how to change those ink barrels, he'd never actually done it himself, and as such, didn't remember how to do it. A week after I left, I got a message from one of my former coworkers that the entire factory was looking to go to the COO's office and demand they rehire me, because Abdul was not only doing a poor job, but he was also being a megalomaniac. I told her not to bother, because if they did rehire me, it would only make the COO hate me even more. Several months after, another former coworker informed me that, not even a month after I was fired, Abdul was demoted back to assistant machine operator, and one of the floor managers had to take over his tasks full-time. 4. A few years ago, I worked under a terrible boss whom I shall call Tiff because of all her tiffs. Unfortunately, I'm not exaggerating when I say terrible. She had HIPAA violations on record. I was told by someone I would expect to know that is a HIPAA violation when managers gossip and spread information about a medical issue, only revealed to them due to ADA requests and/or discovered through the employee healthcare plan. I certainly could be wrong, but I know that it was a big enough issue that management from top down got reprimanded from corporate. Anyway, on with the story. She would also write people up for stuff that she told them to do, write them up for things that happened when they weren't there, change people's schedules with no notice, and then get them in trouble when they didn't show up for the changed schedule. Trying to write people up for using FMLA, the general yelling and petty bullying bad managers do, the works. Senior management knew about all this and aided and abetted her. Anyway, after being hauled into a meeting with her and a senior manager where she lied about me and did her best to paint me as lazy and a generally terrible worker, I'd had enough. I went to the other senior manager, Spineless, and told him that I couldn't deal with this anymore and I had to be transferred to another department in the store. I had experience in a few other areas which were in high demand, so it wouldn't be hard to find a place for me. It would just be hard to fill my spot in the bakery, especially when it was given late in the year, and we were always incredibly busy over the holidays. Spineless said no. Well, actually, he said that he'd see what he could do, but it wasn't likely to happen because I was too important to the bakery to lose. I pointed out that it was so stressful that it was affecting my health and I really couldn't continue. If I had to, I was going to be calling out. He still said no. We can't do anything unless you have a medical condition. Now see, I knew that he actually meant that there was no way in hell they were going to do anything, so I should just shut up already. Unfortunately for him, I don't like subtext like that, and I didn't feel like dealing with the mistreatment anymore. So I sat there for a moment debating, and decided to give him what he said he needed. See, I have a few medical issues that are annoying, but unless they actually keep me from doing my work, it's a kind of a cop-out to bring them up. But under the circumstances, management was being completely unreasonable, so cop-outs it was. I explained that I had an official diagnosis of anxiety, and due to reasons above, I couldn't work under her. Spineless kind of stopped and looked at me, then said, okay. We'll see what we can do, but you'll need to at least get through the holidays. I told him I would do my best, but I couldn't handle the constant threats of write-ups, so he'd have to keep her from enacting any disciplinary measures against me. He said, "Sure." I also added that I really didn't want anyone else knowing about my anxiety, as I don't like my personal life being spread about. About a month later, something else happens where a bunch of cakes were ruined, and I was the last one who touched it. They were someone else's responsibility as soon as I was done with them. The other person just hadn't done their part, and Tiff was trying to get me in trouble however she could. Tiff hands me a write-up to sign. I'm furious, but I carefully write down in the comments section that I have a medical condition interfering with my work, which I had already notified senior management of. Then I insist on her giving me a photocopy of it, which they're supposed to do but often don't. I heard from the supervisor, who was also present, that she saw what I had written. Tiff had apparently shocked Pikachu face and asked if Soup had known anything about my mysterious medical issue. For once, Spineless had followed directions and not shared private information with the world. I probably should have just escalated to corporate at this point, but I ended up not. Just wrote a nicely worded letter about how I had requested ADA accommodations because anxiety technically counts as a disability. I had already looked it up, and they had done nothing. Stuck copies of that letter along with the write-up and a note from my doctor in Spineless's mailbox and in the store manager's mailbox. I should probably point out by this point that about 4 other people had left the bakery due to medical conditions which were directly related to Tiff. They were legit medical conditions, but either exacerbated by her or used as an excuse to get away from her. So I certainly wasn't the first person to do this. Lo and behold, when you stuff enough legal terms along with relevant meeting recaps and dates into a letter, people do something about it. I had meetings with both the store manager, who insisted he had heard nothing about this, and Spineless, and they offered to get me out immediately, but asked if there was any possible way for me to stay through Christmas, which was about 2 weeks away. I didn't really want to be working a different area when everyone else was already crazy busy with no time to catch me up. So I agreed under the condition that they changed my schedule so that I was not scheduled with Tiff at any point in time. And what do you know, they got me out right after Christmas. So yeah, ask and you shall receive, jerks. Hilariously enough, come February, Tiff went on vacation and the bakery supervisor asked me if there was any way I could come back to help cover, which of course I could do. Figured I might as well stick it in their face that the manager was the problem, not the department. Sadly, they didn't do anything about her until she transferred to a different store, where she is no doubt still wreaking havoc. But I escaped with my sanity mostly intact, so that was a win for me. 5. I work as an audio-visual tech at a community college. Basically deal with sound systems, projectors, microphones, etc. I joke that anything that plugs in on campus that's not a computer, that's my gig. We get occasional requests for sound systems in bigger classrooms and common areas. Not hard setups at all. Someone wants to make a presentation and they want to be heard clearly, so we'll set up a microphone on a floor stand, usually above a podium or desk, and run cables to the actual sound system, which is usually an all-in-one unit that has the amp, equalizer, and speaker all together. Set up in a tripod in the corner of the room, it can easily be loud enough for a room of 100 people or so. Anything bigger, and we adjust by adding a second speaker or giving them a beefier system with separate components, amp, equalizer, input boxes, etc. on a cart. Even for bigger sound systems, they still don't really take up that much space in an area if you know what you're doing. This happened years ago. Got a request from a communications art instructor, a speech class. She wanted her class to experience what it would be like to speak in front of a larger audience, so she requested a microphone for a larger classroom that we had. An older, simple lecture hall that held about 140 people. She was having a few different classes all show up at the same time and place, so the room would be packed. I called and talked with Speech Lady about the specifics of her request, letting her know what the setup would involve. "This isn't that big a deal. I just need a microphone, one microphone," she said a little snotty. I started to explain that for a room that size with possibly over 100 people attending, she might want to make sure they're heard and go with the bigger system. Oh, we don't need all that other stuff. Just a microphone. One microphone. That's it. Nothing more. I was getting instructions for my job from someone who actually taught how to give a speech. I hesitated one last time, starting to tell her that for a sound system to work, you actually need things like speakers and cables and nothing else, just the microphone, with a slightly shouty Karen-esque voice. Is this where I say cue malicious compliance? Day of the event arrives. I walk into the room, weaving in and out of the students, and get to the instructor, and was standing at the desk in front of the class. I walked up, smiling. Are you Ms. Speech Lady? Oh yes, do you have our mic? She said in an excited voice, ready to excite her students with sound. I held out a handheld microphone to her. Here you go. She took the microphone a bit gingerly, and then I turned and started to make my way out. But I looked behind me and saw Speech Lady, a person with a doctorate, mind you, looking at the microphone like it was some weird alien device. She even started tapping on it, speaking into it, looking at the sides and bottom, then slapping it with her hand, blowing into it, and finally yelling into it. I could tell a few of the students knew what sound systems were. They're not that hard. When I saw some giggles from the seats at the confused teacher's reaction, I turned back around as I was about to leave the room to see her waving me back over. Still a lot of students filing in. I go back over. How do you work this? I don't see any switches or anything, and don't hear my voice getting any louder. She actually said all this trying to speak into the microphone, as if the sound would magically be amplified in midair. I smirked. Oh, you wanted to make you louder? Well, for that you're going to need, I actually did air quotes, all that other stuff. She still looked confused, but I could tell light was starting to creep into her brain. I turned again and started on my way out while she called out, Wait, I guess I need... Wait! I could have been a prick and just walked out from there, but the students didn't deserve any bad because of their stupid teacher. I had brought one of our portable sound systems with me to the lecture hall, but kept it outside the room. I walked back in, set it up in about 3 minutes, placing the unit on a tripod, the mic on a boom stand, and an XLR cable connecting the mic to the system. I gave it the briefest of sound checks simply by saying, loud noises. Thanks, Anchorman, and turned to go for good this time. During the quick setup, Speech Lady was apologizing me until she was blue in the face. But then she gained her composure quickly after my sound check. She turned out to be cool, writing me an email apology of sorts, and thanking me for my help after her supersized class. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 173. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you could please hit the like button before you go, I would greatly appreciate it, and share the video around with friends and family. And we have a little shout out to give to the author of story number 4. And that goes to, the Reddit username is LogicGirl1, but they're also an author. Their name is Aleph Faye, or Aleph Faye. I looked up reviews of their books, and the same person reviewing the two of them, but a bit of time apart, and they had two different pronunciations. But most recently, Aleph Faye. And I will link to their website so you can go and check out their website as well. Okay, and thank you very much for allowing us to use your story. Right, now before we go, let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... This one's for all you nerds out there. What is your favorite Star Trek character that has yet to be played by another actor, not including flashbacks to when they were younger? I'm going to say General Martok because he, quite frankly, in my opinion, is the best of all the Klingons. He's like he embodied all the good things, but he's aware of the flaws, great warrior, but he's also very intelligent as well. Probably one of the more rounded Klingon characters we've had. No offense to Worf, I love Worf, of course, but he was raised by humans, so I think that gives him a different perspective on Klingon culture. But Star Trek has been going for, well, it's almost 60 years. We're not quite there yet, but we'll get there in the next decade. So, lots to choose from, but a character that has not been played by another actor as yet. because it's going to happen eventually, we know it is. And I'm fine with that. Let me know what you think in a comment below. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.